I live alone in a pretty quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy. Just one of those cookie-cutter suburbs where nothing exciting ever really happens. But one night, about 6 months ago, something off happened that I can't explain and still think about way too often. It started around 9:30 p.m. on a Thursday. I was watching a basketball game when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I figured it might be a neighbor or a delivery driver with the wrong address. I walked to the door, looked through the peephole, and saw a man holding a pizza bag and a receipt. "Delivery for Noah?" he called out, reading my name and my exact address. That's what froze me. I hadn't ordered anything. I hadn't used any food apps that week. I cracked open the door and told him, "I think you've got the wrong person. I didn't order anything." He smiled politely and insisted, "It's already paid for. You sure you don't want to double check?" I asked which app it was from. He didn't answer. He just held the bag toward me again. When I hesitated, he lowered his voice and said, "Just take it." I told him no, pushed the door closed, and locked it. I stood there for a minute, trying to shake the weird feeling crawling up my spine. I watched through the peephole. He didn't leave. He just stood there, staring at my door for what felt like forever. Finally, I watched him walk toward the street, but there was no car, no delivery vehicle, nothing. He walked off into the darkness. I checked every delivery app on my phone. Nothing showed any recent orders. I called the local pizza places. None had any orders under my name. Later that night, I checked my porch camera footage. The man had approached from the sidewalk, not from a car. He'd been watching my house for almost 20 minutes before he even rang the doorbell. I reported it to the police, but there wasn't much they could do. No crime had technically been committed, but here's the part that keeps me up at night. The next morning, I found a sticky note on my back door. All it said was, "Missed you this time." It was around 10 p.m. when I got a sudden craving for Thai food. I opened the food delivery app and placed my usual order spicy pad, Thai, and spring rolls. About 40 minutes later, I got the notification that the driver had arrived. I went outside to meet him. The guy looked normal, maybe mid-30s, wearing a black hoodie and a ball cap pulled low. He didn't say much, just handed me the bag and nodded before walking back to his car. But the weird thing? The car didn't have any lights on. No engine running. It was like he was just standing there, pretending to drive something. I went back inside, sat down, and opened the bag. It was completely empty. No containers, no food, no receipt. Just an empty, crumpled paper bag. I rushed back outside to confront him, but his car was gone. I checked the app again, and the delivery status had changed to canceled. It didn't make sense. How could it be canceled when I had just taken the bag? I contacted customer support. They had no record of my order. None. It was like it had never existed. I checked my card statements, no charges. Later that night, I noticed muddy footprints on my porch that hadn't been there before. They didn't lead to the street, they led around my house. I live in a pretty quiet cul-de-sac, so I usually don't think twice about answering the door at night. I ordered sushi from a place I go to all the time. About 45 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I grabbed my wallet and headed to the door. The guy standing there didn't look like the usual drivers. He was wearing a leather jacket, sunglasses at night, and had this weird, twitchy smile. I opened the door a crack, and he shoved the bag toward me without saying a word. I took the bag and said, "Thank you," but he just stood there. No words, no leaving. I asked, "Do I need to sign something?" Still nothing, just the smile. I closed the door and locked it, peeking through the blinds. He was still standing there, hands in his pockets, staring at the door. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I called the restaurant to ask if they had a driver in a leather jacket. They said no, they used a third-party service. I checked the app. The delivery was marked completed, but the name listed didn't match anyone I'd seen before. I watched as the man finally turned and walked back to a van with no license plates. He sat there for another 15 minutes before finally driving away. I didn't eat the food, I just threw it in the trash. It was a rainy Thursday night, and I didn't feel like cooking. I ordered ramen from a small shop down the street. Everything looked normal. The app showed the driver's name as Tommy with a small profile picture of a guy wearing a hat. About 30 minutes later, I got a notification that Tommy had arrived. I opened the door and froze. The man standing there wasn't Tommy, or at least, not the guy in the profile. He was much older, with wild hair and pale skin. His eyes never quite met mine. He just stood there, holding the bag, staring at me. Before I could speak, he said my full name, then my birth date, and my old address, where I hadn't lived in almost a decade. He smiled and said, "Took me a while to find you again." I slammed the door and locked every bolt I had. I watched through the window as he just stood on my porch for over 15 minutes, unmoving, holding the bag. Finally, he left, walking down the street with no car in sight. I reported it to the delivery app, but they claimed there was no record of a driver named Tommy in my area that night. I live in a downtown apartment with a secure entrance, but somehow that didn't seem to matter this time. Around 11 p.m., I heard knocking at my door. Not the doorbell, just quiet, rhythmic knocking. I checked my phone, no delivery expected, but I heard someone whisper, "Food delivery," through the door. I didn't order anything. I asked who it was. Silence. I peeked through the peephole and saw a man standing there in a delivery jacket. He held a bag labeled with a restaurant I'd never heard of, but something felt wrong. The bag looked empty, folded flat like it had never held anything. He stood there for almost 5 minutes before slowly kneeling down and pressing his face against my door, breathing loudly. I called building security. By the time they arrived, the hallway was empty. But the next morning, I found a note taped to the side of my apartment door. It read, "You're lucky you didn't open it.